I'm Coach Joey D. This is Coach Kevin Kirk, world-renowned swing coach, great friend of mine. Today, we are welcoming you to Hit It Great Coach's Corner. We're going to talk a little bit today about fixes and flaws. What do you think about internal hip rotation? How does it affect players, both positive, negative? What do you think we should start with and help people to understand why it's so important?
Well, I think you start with the idea that form always follows function, right? So it's when you see somebody swing a golf club, and you see something that doesn't meet your eye or doesn't pass the test, you start asking yourself, okay, is it a motor pattern or is it a functional issue, right?
Right.
And we don't really know. To be fair, the only way you know is to assess. Right?
Correct.
And so that's why these assessments become so important and such a valuable tool for a coach.
How do you think over the years, and Kevin and I spent many, many years out together, very fortunate, a lot of gratitude for being out there to be able to work with the best players in the world. But the great thing about Coach's Corner is this is for every player at every level. What have you seen change? Like, what do you think collectively we've watched change in golf, and how do biomechanics and swing coaches, how does it come together to help players move better, feel better, play better at every level?
Well, I think the players are definitely more aware that they need help from physios, they need help from strength coaches to be able to learn how to move better, because ultimately sport is movement, right?
Right.
And the better you move, and the more you can sustain that movement, that quality movement over time, the better you're going to perform.
So if there's a restriction, what we want to do is identify it. They can see it from a trained eye, and as a former player himself, and he's developed many, many greats from juniors all the way up to some of the greatest professionals ever. I always admire and want to listen and learn from him. So what do you think next step would be? Let's talk about internal hip rotation and what does it mean in the golf swing? Show us.
Yeah, so for internal hip rotation has to do with the femur kind of turning against the pelvis this way internally. So on the backswing side for a right-hander, is I start kind of winding my chest this way. It's the ability to kind of wind my rib cage, load the pelvis to the femur, and make sure that the femur is kind of hanging in there and not washing out, or there's some sort of restriction, or hypermobility is another one we have to look at, right? So down the line, you would see things like when you have a restriction, you'll see one of two things. Either you'll see a lot of hip motion this way, start moving back as people start trying to turn because they can't load the hip, or the other things you could potentially see is start seeing balance issues. It usually starts disturbing their balance, either forwards, backwards, side to side.
Let me jump in for a second, Coach. Go back to that setup position. Here's some things that you should look at. So if the internal rotation doesn't work properly, show me what happens and how quick you can lose flexion and you get into total extension with the right leg. So that really kind of starts to look like the body's moving away from the load point, and now like he's shifting his weight to the wrong side, right? We want to see with proper flexion, as you have internal rotation, you have proper load, right? But what Coach is showing you is with bad rotation, look how far we lose the ability to find the center of the human body. And that's one of the things you should look at. So the other thing you talked about was you start to get high and you lose your balance forward, right? So that's yet another issue, and you see the leg straightens again, the body starts to get too long, it loses its angles, and then Coach is showing you what another flaw could be. So those are two things down the line. These are two very important things that you should pay attention to. And, video or a trained eye is a great way to help you. But the other way we're going to figure it out is an opportunity to do a table assessment, which we'll get to next. All right, so let's get to the table assessment, which actually give us the opportunity to find out how much you actually have in range of motion. So why don't you lie down? I'll take the measurement. And this is going to give us an opportunity to see what's real versus what you think you should be doing or where you are versus what the reality is, right? And many times those two things don't match. We're going to put Coach's leg up at 90 degrees. And then once we do that, we're just going to put this little tool on there. And you're going to go ahead and internally rotate and stop right there. Okay, so let's get our measurement. Come on up. So we have 38 degrees of internal rotation. What does that tell us, 38 degrees? So now we have a metric on where you are, and with the proper protocol and the proper movement patterns, exercises, and the ability to get your neuroreceptors, your brain, to tell your body what to do, we can increase that. And what would you say the range would be in between 35 to 65? What do you like as a swing coach to create a good amount of movement?
I've always thought 45 in my mind is a good number.
Yeah.
It's kind of a good starting point.
I agree.
So plus or minus 15 is probably good.
Yeah.
And so I think that as we start kind of thinking about if 45 would be a good target.
Right.
So I would probably just a little bit on the low side of optimal there. So.
Right. And I think what's great about what Coach is saying is there's an optimal range. Everybody is a little different. But for this Coach's Corner, we at least got one of the foremost experts and my good friend to talk us through what does it mean to have good movement patterns and the body's ability to cooperate with the swing. Because if you don't, look at what Coach said about what can go wrong. And that's what we don't want to fight in the golf swing. We want you to be able to play with a level of ease. Golf is not perfect, but golf is a game that's ever changing and ever moving. And I think if you pay attention to these things, like in this Coach's Corner, especially internal hip rotation, you're going to find that there's a lot of benefit that you can get out of this. Once again, my good friend, world-renowned swing coach, Coach Kevin Kirk. I'm Coach Joey D. Thanks for joining me today on Hit It Great.